Welcome to the deep dive, where today we're diving headfirst, I guess you could say, into the world of water religion and social hierarchy in India.
Yeah.
And you've provided us with some really compelling excerpts, academic papers, historical accounts,
Really fascinating stuff.
the works, and they all sort of circle around this idea of Hindu beliefs and how they impact daily life, especially for women and the Dalit community.
It's a story that goes back thousands of years, and to really understand the impact, I think we need to start with how these historical beliefs about water as this spiritually cleansing element, but also capable of carrying social pollution, how those beliefs still permeate modern India. Even today, they impact the success of water projects that are intended to help.
Okay, so ancient beliefs with very real modern consequences.
Exactly.
That's what it sounds like. I'm ready. Where do we even begin?
Well, we begin with the Vedas, right?
Okay.
These ancient texts are really ground zero for understanding how water is perceived in Hinduism.
Right. The sacred scriptures, the
Yeah.
hymns, the rituals. What do they tell us about water?
So in the Vedas, water is called Apa.
Okay.
And it's more than just H2O. It's considered this primal, purifying force, the very foundation of the universe.
Wow.
So we're not just talking about washing away dirt here,
Mm-hmm.
but about spiritual cleansing, a deeper kind of purification.
So it's almost like a divine force, this idea that it can erase impurities physically and spiritually.
Exactly. And the Rig Veda, one of the oldest and most important Vedic texts, actually has this beautiful passage. It says, "Hail to you, divine, unfathomable, all-purifying waters," which I think really shows just how deep this reverence for water runs, this power to literally cleanse sin.
Wow, divine, unfathomable. I mean, they really elevate it to a sacred status.
They do.
And there's this connection, too, to the divine feminine, isn't there?
Water is also seen as a manifestation of Shakti,
Yeah.
which is the feminine principle, a powerful symbol of creation and life-giving force. Even the simple act of using water, whether in everyday life or during rituals, was considered a spiritual sacrifice, a way to connect with the divine.
That's fascinating, but here's the thing that I think is interesting.
Yeah.
If water is this universally revered element, right?
Mm-hmm.
Shouldn't everyone have equal access to it? You'd think that would be a given.
Logically, yes. But that's where things get really interesting.
Yeah.
Because woven into these beliefs is the Varna system,
Okay.
a social structure that's described in the Vedas, and it becomes deeply intertwined with ideas of purity and pollution. And this is where we start to see the seeds of inequality, I think.
Right. The Varnas, the Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaisyas, and Sudras.
Exactly.
And the Rig Veda talks about their creation from the Purushas, the primordial cosmic being.
Right. And now it's crucial to remember that while social distinctions existed in the early Vedic period, the rigid caste system and the concept of untouchability as we know it today weren't present yet.
Okay.
The Varnas were more about roles and occupation,
Yeah.
a way to organize society.
So instead of a rigid hierarchy, it was more like a division of labor based on skills and aptitude.
Precisely.
Yeah.
So the Brahmins, for instance, were the priests, the keepers of knowledge, the spiritual guides.
Okay.
The Kshatriyas were the warriors, protectors of the people.
Mm-hmm.
Then you had the Vaisyas, the merchants and farmers, the backbone of the economy.
Okay.
And finally, the Sudras, who performed essential labor, ensuring that society functioned smoothly.
Okay. So when did the shift towards this more rigid hierarchical system begin?
Right.
When did things change?
This is where our deep dive takes us to the post-Vedic era
Okay.
and the emergence of texts like the Laws of Manu, also known as the Manusmriti, and it's a pivotal turn in the story.
So we're moving beyond the Vedas now.
Yeah.
What changes in this post-Vedic period?
Well, the post-Vedic texts, often called Smritis, placed a greater emphasis on formalizing rituals and the concept of dharma, which can be understood as moral law, righteous conduct, duty.
Mm-hmm.
And the Laws of Manu, well, they were incredibly influential in shaping Hindu social order for centuries.
And these laws essentially codified the caste system, didn't they?
Precisely, Manu connected a person's occupation to their ritual purity. And this created a hierarchy with Brahmins at the very top. And the Sudras, who were associated with tasks considered polluting, like cremation, for example, relegated to the bottom.
So water, which was once this universally sacred element, starts being used as a tool to maintain social boundaries.
It does. It's a stark contrast.
It is.
Contact with Sudras was now seen as polluting, and you can probably guess what was prescribed as the primary means of purification.
Water.
Water
Exactly.
is both revered and used to separate.
Yes, you've hit the nail on the head. The Manusmriti even states that water touched by a Sudra becomes polluted.
Wow.
And this belief had tangible and, frankly, heartbreaking consequences for how they lived their lives.
So on a day-to-day basis, what did this actually mean for the sudras? How did this play out in their lives? Well, restrictions were everywhere. There were strict rules about physical separation from other castes, and specific rituals like the chad purification were mandatory if contact with a sudra occurred. And this involved using water from a naula, which is a type of natural spring believed to be especially pure.
So even the source of the water mattered. It wasn't just about water in general.
Exactly, and to truly grasp how deeply ingrained these ancient beliefs are, let's fast forward to the present day,
Okay.
to the village of Chuni,
Okay.
nestled in the Kuman Hills of India. This is where our case study unfolds.
What makes Chuni so significant?
Well, Chuni is considered a water-abundant place,
Okay.
blessed with numerous springs and sources. But even here,
Okay.
those ancient beliefs about water and social order still hold sway, shaping lives in really profound ways.
So you have this tragic irony and abundance of water, but not everyone has equal access to it.
It's a harsh reality.
It's unbelievable.
And in Chuni, access to the most desirable water sources, the Nolas we talked about earlier, is directly tied to caste. These springs aren't just water sources. They're believed to be the abode of Jal Devi, the water goddess.
Okay.
So even within a village deemed water abundant, a hierarchy exists, and it directly reflects the caste system.
Right.
And unfortunately, that places the Dalit community descendants of those once considered Sudras at the bottom of this hierarchy.
Right.
And their experiences are really essential to understanding the human cost of these ancient beliefs. And when you hear the Dalit women of Chuni speak, you really understand the weight of these age-old beliefs. They talk about this constant struggle just to get enough water for their families.
It's heartbreaking. I mean, here we are in the 21st century talking about something as essential as water being limited by social structures established centuries ago.
It really is a stark reminder of how deeply entrenched these beliefs can be.
Right.
Imagine like the despair of being parched right with water nearby, but being too afraid to even take a sip because of where you stand in this social hierarchy.
It's unimaginable in this day and age. It makes those ancient texts feel very real and present.
Right.
Do the upper caste women ever question this?
Well, it's interesting because while some upper caste women do benefit from this system in a way, they're also bound by its rules and expectations.
Right.
So even if they have easier access to water, they still adhere to the purity rituals, sometimes limiting their own water use to avoid polluting the nalas.
Wow. So the system is limiting, even for those it seemingly benefits. It's like a self-perpetuating cycle.
It is.
You'd think that modern solutions like water projects would help break this cycle.
You would think that, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
And there have been significant efforts to bring modern water infrastructure to these regions. But here's the catch. They often fail to address the underlying social dynamics, the deeply ingrained beliefs that shape behavior.
Why is that you'd think a reliable source of clean water, that would be a game changer?
Right. It's not just about the physical infrastructure, though, is it?
Right.
Let's look at the village of Rulaket, another case study that you shared. They received funding for a World Bank water project, specifically designed to improve access for everyone, especially marginalized communities, like the Dalits. Sounds great on paper, right?
It does.
So what went wrong? Well, they implemented a system of tap stands,
Okay.
which seemed like a step in the right direction. But then they excluded a Dalit woman named Deepa Devi
Wow.
and her children from accessing this new water source because they lived at the top of a hill.
They excluded her because of where she lived.
And the justification they gave was, those hamlets are uphill. The technology of gravity flow cannot make water flow uphill.
Are you serious? Gravity doesn't discriminate. It's a force of nature, not a tool for social engineering.
It highlights how these projects, even with the best intentions, can fail when they don't account for the social realities on the ground.
Right.
They were so focused on the how of water delivery, the pipes, the pumps, that they completely overlooked the who
Right.
and the deeply ingrained inequalities that influence access.
It's like they tried to fix a leaky faucet when the entire plumbing system was flawed.
Exactly.
And this isn't an isolated incident, is it? I mean, we have those quotes from the Dalit members of the Village Water and Sanitation Committees, the VWSCs. That really stood out to me.
And those quotes are incredibly poignant. I think they paint this picture of being given a seat at the table, but not a real voice. So officially, they're involved in the decision-making process.
Right.
But their opinions, their experiences are often ignored.
So it's a form of tokenism. They're there to check a box, but not to genuinely contribute.
Sadly, that's often the case. And this lack of genuine representation of truly understanding and valuing the lived experiences of the Dalit community is a major barrier to creating equitable solutions.
It's almost like a paradox, right? We're talking about these efforts that are supposed to provide more equitable access to a fundamental human right,
Right.
yet they stumble over these deeply entrenched social barriers.
It's true. And it brings us to, I think, a really crucial insight, a key takeaway from all of this.
Yeah.
Policies and projects that aim to empower marginalized communities are essential, no doubt.
Right.
But they can only go so far if they don't address the root causes, the historical injustices, the ingrained beliefs that perpetuate these cycles of inequality.
You've given us so much to think about today. I mean, it's like we're really peeling back these layers of history to understand the complex realities of the present. What's your big takeaway from all of this? What's the thing that really stays with you?
I think for me, it's the realization that access to something as essential as water,
Right.
something that many of us take for granted, can be so profoundly shaped by these social structures and these really deep-seated cultural beliefs. It's a stark reminder that true progress, true equity, requires more than just technical solutions. It requires a transformation of mindsets
Right.
and dismantling those invisible barriers that limit human potential.
This deep dive has been truly eye-opening. We started with these ancient texts, the Vedas,
Right.
which revere water as this sacred purifying force, the very foundation of life. And yet over time, we see how those beliefs became intertwined with social hierarchies, ultimately leading to these very real disparities that we see today.
It's a cautionary tale in a way, I think.
Yeah.
It underscores the responsibility we all have to really critically examine those deeply held beliefs, the ones that we often inherit, and to question their impact and advocate for systems that are truly equitable and just.
You've definitely left us with a powerful thought to ponder. I mean, can access to water ever truly be equitable in a society
Right.
where the very act of fetching it, of quenching one's thirst,
Right.
is bound by these centuries-old notions of purity and pollution?
It's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
And it's a question that's relevant not just in India, but anywhere in the world where access to essential resources
Right.
becomes intertwined with social hierarchies and historical injustices.
This has been a profound and frankly essential conversation for our listener. We hope this deep dive has provided a new framework for understanding this complex issue. It's a journey that began in the ancient past, but very much continues to unfold in our present moment.
It does.
And with that, we'll leave you to ponder those lingering questions. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deeper into the world around you.